The night I came home from my shift at the hospital cafeteria, my feet so swollen I had to hold the railing just to climb the 3 steps to my own front porch. My son was sitting in my recliner watching a football game with the volume turned up so loud I could feel it in my chest before I even opened the door. He didn't look up. I stood in the entryway for a moment, still in my uniform, smelling like dish soap and industrial cleaner, and I watched him. 41 years old. Healthy. Strong. Sitting in my chair in my house, eating from a bowl of popcorn that I had bought at the grocery store 2 days ago. He didn't look up. I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water and found the sink full of dishes, not rinsed, just stacked cereal bowls with dried milk crusted around the inside, a skillet with what looked like scrambled eggs still stuck to the surface, juice glasses ringed with orange at the bottom. I had washed everything before I left for my shift at 6 that morning. That was 12 hours ago. I filled my glass, drank it standing over the sink, and went to bed without saying a word. I should back up. My name is Connie. I'm 67 years old. I lived for a while in a particular kind of fog that I didn't even recognize as fog until someone finally turned a light on. I raised my son, Travis, mostly on my own. His father left when Travis was 11, and it was just the two of us in the house on Millbrook Road for a long time after that. I worked at the county hospital for 31 years. Dietary services, food prep, the cafeteria line, not glamorous work. Nobody ever asked me what I did at parties and leaned in closer because they were fascinated, but it was honest and it paid the mortgage, and it put Travis through 2 years of community college before he decided school wasn't for him. I didn't argue with that. I figured he'd find his way. He met his wife, Deborah, when he was 26. She was 24, pretty in a sharp kind of way, always dressed like she was about to go somewhere more important than wherever she currently was. I tried to like her. I really did. She had a quick mind, and I respected that. But even in the beginning, before everything, there was something about the way she looked at my house, at my furniture, my curtains, the floral arrangement I'd had on the dining room table for 15 years, that felt like assessment, like she was taking inventory. They got married in a small ceremony. I paid for the flowers. For the first few years, they rented an apartment across town, and things were fine. I saw them on holidays, sometimes for Sunday dinners. Travis called occasionally. It wasn't close, but it was functional, and I had my life, my routine, my coworker Pauline, who was my closest friend, my Tuesday night church group, my garden in the backyard that I tended every spring and summer without fail. Then my son lost his job. He'd been working for a logistics company, something in operations management, and the company restructured. He got a severance package, 3 months, which at his salary was not nothing, and he told me not to worry. He'd have something new within 6 weeks. He was confident. Travis has always been confident. It's one of the things I used to love about him. 6 weeks became 3 months. 3 months became 6. The severance ran out. Deborah had been doing part-time bookkeeping work, but nothing steady, and they had a daughter, my granddaughter Kaylee, who was 4 at the time and needed things that cost money. Child care, clothing, food. I want to be clear, I did not hesitate, not for a single second. When Travis called and asked if they could stay with me for a while, just until he got back on his feet, 3 months at most, I said yes before he finished the sentence. I said yes, the way you say yes to something that isn't even a real question. Of course. Come home. You're my son. They moved in on a Saturday in March. I helped them carry boxes up the stairs. The first month was fine. Better than fine, actually. I liked having Kaylee there. She was a bright, serious little girl who asked a lot of questions about everything. Why the sky was that color, why the neighbors had a different kind of mailbox than us, why I put salt in the pasta water. I loved answering her. I loved sitting at the kitchen table with her while she drew pictures and explained them to me in great detail. Travis was applying for jobs. He had a system. He showed me the spreadsheet he kept, all the companies he'd contacted, the follow-ups he'd scheduled. I believed in him. Deborah was less easy to read. She was polite enough, but she had opinions about the house. Not stated directly, just implied. She rearranged the spice cabinet the second week because, she said, the way I had it organized didn't make sense. She moved the couch in the living room 6 inches to the left because the old position blocked the flow. She put a basket near the front door for shoes and sent me a text. Not said to my face, a text, asking if I could please use it because shoes by the door were a tripping hazard. I used the basket. I told myself these were small things, adjustments. People living together have to find a way. By month 3, Travis had had 2 phone interviews and no callbacks. He was discouraged. I understood that. Job searching is demoralizing work, and I didn't push. I made dinner every night. I kept the house clean. I gave Kaylee her bath when Deborah was tired, which was most evenings. Month 4 came and went. Then, month 5. One evening, I sat down at the kitchen table with a piece of paper and a pen, and I added up my monthly expenses. Mortgage, $1,140. Utilities, electric, gas, water, had gone up considerably with 4 people in the house, $340. Groceries, which had roughly doubled, $680. My own small expenses, gas for my car, my medications, the one dinner out a month I allowed myself with Pauline, maybe $200. My take-home from the hospital cafeteria, working 5 days a week, was $2,100 a month. I sat with that paper for a long time. I didn't say anything to Travis. He was already stressed. I didn't want to add to it. I called the hospital HR department the next morning and asked about picking up extra shifts. They had openings in the early morning prep rotation, 4 a.m. starts, 3 days a week, on top of my regular schedule. I took them. I want you to understand what 4 a.m. means. It means waking up at 3:15. It means driving across town in the dark, in the winter, when the roads are still icy and no one else is moving yet. It means standing on concrete floors for 8 hours before your regular colleagues even arrive. My feet, which had always been fine, started swelling by the end of those shifts. My lower back, which had been manageable for years, became something I thought about every time I stood up from a chair. I was 65 years old. I was doing this. I didn't complain. That's the thing I want you to understand, and also the thing I'm most ashamed of, looking back. I didn't complain because I loved my son, and because I kept telling myself it was temporary, and because somewhere along the way I had decided that being needed was the same thing as being loved. The shift happened so gradually I didn't see it until it was already complete. Deborah stopped asking and started telling. Not rudely exactly. She had a way of framing things as observations that were obviously directives. The bathroom grout could really use some attention. Kaylee's been eating a lot of processed snacks lately. The TV in the living room has a glare problem in the afternoons. It might be worth looking into curtains. The curtains I'd had for 12 years. Travis stopped being the man with the spreadsheet. He woke up later and later. By month 7, he was rarely up before 10. He'd started watching a lot of television, the kind of extended multi-season streaming that takes over a person's schedule. He was friendly enough when I was home, but vague. When I asked about the job search, he'd say something like, "I've got some things in the pipeline," and change the subject. One Thursday, I came home from a double shift. I had covered for a colleague who'd called out sick, so I'd been on my feet since 4 that morning, and it was now nearly 8 at night. And I found a note on the kitchen counter. It was written in Deborah's handwriting on a piece of paper she'd torn from a notepad I kept by the phone. "We're out of the good coffee. Also need more of the organic orange juice Kaylee likes, and we're almost out of paper towels. No name, no please, no thank you." I put the note in my pocket and went to sit on the edge of my bed for a few minutes before I could do anything else. My bedroom, I should tell you, had changed. When they first moved in, I'd given Travis and Deborah the larger guest room across the hall because it made sense. It had a full bathroom attached. Kaylee was in the smaller guest room, which I'd fixed up with a little lamp and some books and a soft rug. I kept my own room, of course. But somewhere around month 6, without a conversation, some of my bedroom furniture had been rearranged. My writing desk, which I had always kept near the window, had been moved to make room for an exercise bike that Deborah had ordered online. I hadn't been asked. I'd come home one afternoon to find the desk in the corner and the bike where it had been. My desk fit in the corner. It was fine. But I lay awake that night looking at my ceiling and thought about the word fine. I'd been using it so often it had stopped meaning anything. The next 6 months are harder to talk about because I still can't fully explain how I let them happen. Travis's job search had effectively stopped, as far as I could tell. He'd started doing some freelance handyman work, odd jobs for neighbors, small repairs, but it brought in almost nothing. Deborah had picked up more bookkeeping clients and was working from home in a way that required the house to be quiet during certain hours, which meant I was asked via text not to run the vacuum or do laundry between 9 and noon or 2 and 4 in my own house. Kaylee was in kindergarten by then, and I drove her most mornings because Travis was usually still asleep and Deborah was on calls. I loved that drive. Kaylee would tell me about what she was going to do that day, and I'd listen. And for those 15 minutes in the car, I felt like myself. It was Pauline who said it first. We were having lunch at the diner we always went to on the last Friday of the month, and I was telling her, not complaining, just explaining about the coffee note and the vacuum schedule and the exercise bike in my room. And Pauline put down her fork and looked at me in that particular way she has, direct and without any softening. "Connie," she said, "do you hear yourself?" I said I wasn't sure what she meant. "You are working double shifts at 66 years old," she said, "to pay bills for a household where nobody else is working. You cannot use your own washing machine when you want to. You got a grocery list left on your counter like you're the housekeeper, and your response to all of it is to tell me it's fine." I opened my mouth and closed it again. "It is not fine," she said, "and you know it's not fine, or you wouldn't be telling me all of this." I cried in the car on the way home, not dramatically, just quietly, with both hands on the wheel, letting it happen. I did not march home and have it out with my son that afternoon. I wish I had. Instead, I spent 3 weeks sitting with what Pauline had said, turning it over, looking for the angle at which it stopped being true. I couldn't find one. I tried the conversation I should have had a year earlier. I sat Travis down on a Sunday morning. Deborah was at a client's, Kaylee was at a birthday party, and I told him that I was struggling financially. I said it as gently as I could. I said I needed to talk about a plan, a timeline, something concrete. He was surprised. I could see that, genuinely surprised, which told me something I hadn't fully admitted to myself, which was that I had hidden how bad things were because I didn't want to add to his stress, and so he had simply assumed things were fine, because I kept saying they were. He said he understood. He said he'd been meaning to talk to me about that too. He said he had some leads he was following up, and he thought things would start moving in the next month or two. A month or two. That night, Deborah came home and made dinner. She cooked occasionally, when she was in a particular mood, and Travis must have said something to her because she was different with me that evening. Solicitous. She asked about my back. She offered to do the dishes. It lasted about 4 days. After that, things went back to exactly how they had been. The moment I remember most clearly happened on a Wednesday evening in October. I'd worked an early shift and a regular shift back to back, which I'd been doing more often to cover someone on medical leave. I came in through the back door at 6:30, my feet in that particular kind of pain that sits right in the arch and radiates up the ankle, and I went to the kitchen to make myself something to eat before I lost the energy to stand. My stock pot was on the stove, the one I've had since Travis was small, the heavy one I use for soups. It was full of something, pasta it looked like, sitting in about an inch of cold water. They'd made dinner and left the pot. Just left it, no note, no "we saved you a plate," just the pot. I stood there looking at it, and I heard them in the living room, Travis and Deborah and Kaylee watching something, laughing at something, the comfortable sounds of a family at the end of a day, and something shifted in me. Not anger exactly, something quieter than anger, something that felt like clarity. I thought, this is my house, this is my stock pot. I have been on my feet for 14 hours, and not one of them thought to put a plate aside for me. I covered the pot and went to my room without eating. I sat on the edge of my bed and I thought about a woman who had raised a son by herself, who had worked for 30 years, who had said yes without hesitation, and then said yes again, and then kept saying yes until there was nothing left to say it about. I thought, this is not love. I have been confusing something else for love. I called a lawyer the next morning. I'd gotten the name from my church group. A woman named Dr. Patricia Hensley had used him when she'd had a property dispute with a neighbor, and she'd said he was straightforward and didn't overcharge. His name was Walter Greer. He had an office downtown above a dry cleaning shop, and he listened to me for about 20 minutes without interrupting. Then he explained that in the state of Ohio, when someone has been living in your home for more than 30 days, they have tenant rights regardless of whether money has changed hands. He explained what the process looked like. He explained my options. He was matter of fact about all of it, which I appreciated. I didn't want sympathy in that office. I wanted information. I asked him what he needed from me to begin. He told me. I wrote a check for the retainer and drove home. I didn't tell Travis right away. I needed time to make sure I was prepared for every version of how that conversation might go. I called Pauline and told her what I'd done, and she said, "Good, now don't back down." I spent 2 weeks getting my finances in order. I looked at what it would cost to run the house on my income alone, just me. It was manageable. Not comfortable, but manageable, especially if I dropped the extra shifts I'd taken on. The day I told Travis was a Sunday in November. I asked Deborah and him to sit at the kitchen table. Kaylee was napping. I sat across from them, and I did not apologize for what I was about to say. I told them I loved my son and I loved my granddaughter. I told them that I'd been glad to help and that I had tried to help for as long as I could. I told them that the arrangement was no longer working for me and that I needed them to begin making a plan to find housing of their own. I said, "I've spoken to a lawyer and I want to do this the right way, so I'd like to give you 90 days, which is more than the law requires." Deborah's face went through several things in about 10 seconds. Travis stared at the table. Then Deborah said, "90 days is not a lot of time." I said, "It's 3 months. I think it's fair." Travis looked up. "Mom, we're not in a position." "I know," I said. "I understand that. That's why I'm giving you 3 months and not 30 days. What happened next was not pretty. Deborah said things I won't repeat here. Travis said things I hope he's thought about since. There were accusations that I was selfish, that I was abandoning my family, that I had never really supported them, and this proved it. Kaylee woke up in the middle of it and came to the doorway of the kitchen and looked at all of us, and I went to her and took her hand and walked her back to her room and sat with her until things got quiet. That's the part that still hurts. Looking at Kaylee's face, they did not leave in 90 days. They left in 81. I think Deborah's parents, who lived in Indiana, agreed to let them stay for a while, which was the solution I had privately hoped for, but hadn't said. The morning they drove away, I stood on the front porch and waved. Travis didn't look at me. Kaylee pressed her hand flat against the car window as they pulled out of the driveway. I went inside and stood in the kitchen for a long time. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been for 2 years. Not an empty quiet, not a lonely quiet, just quiet. The refrigerator hum, the furnace cycling on, the sound of the bare maple out back moving in the wind. I washed the few dishes that were in the sink. I put the kettle on. I stood at the kitchen window while it heated and looked at my backyard, the garden beds all covered now for winter, the bird feeder I'd forgotten to fill for weeks. I filled the bird feeder that afternoon. It took me about 10 minutes, and it was cold, and my back was stiff, but I did it. And then I went inside and sat at my writing desk, back at the window where it belonged, and I wrote Kaylee a letter, just a short one, telling her I loved her and I was thinking about her and that I hoped she would come visit when she was older and we could sit in the kitchen and she could ask me all the questions she wanted. I've been taking only my regular shifts since January. My feet stopped swelling. I sleep through the night now. Pauline and I have started going to a garden show in the spring. We bought tickets months ago, something we've been talking about doing for years. I've replanted the herb bed I'd let go. I started going to church again on Sunday mornings instead of just Tuesday evenings because I'm not working early shifts anymore and I have the time. I heard from Travis twice in the first 3 months after they left. Both times were short calls, stiff and careful, mostly about Kaylee. I answered every question he asked and I didn't bring up what had happened because I don't think he's ready for that conversation, and I'm not sure I am either. What I know is this. I love my son enough to say yes when it mattered, and I love myself enough, finally, to say no when it mattered too. It took me 2 years to learn the difference between those things. I wish it had taken less time. But I'm 67 years old, and I still have time. And I know now what I should have known from the beginning, that this house and the life inside it belongs to me. I take my coffee on the porch now in the mornings when the weather allows. Just me. Just the bird feeder and the bare garden beds waiting for spring and the particular silence of a house that is yours in every room. I didn't know how much I'd missed it until I got it back. I keep thinking about that note on the counter. No name, no please, just a list of things I was expected to go by. For a long time I told myself that was a small thing, and maybe it was, on its own. But I've come to understand that the small things are never really small. They're just the visible edges of something much larger underneath. Every grocery list left without a thank you, every dish left in the sink. Every morning my son slept past 10 while I drove to work in the dark. None of those things happened by accident. They happened because I had taught everyone in that house, slowly and without meaning to, that my time and my body and my resources had no limit, that the well would never run dry, that Connie would handle it. That's the part I had to sit with hardest. Not what they did, but what I allowed. I don't say that to be unkind to myself. I understand now why I did it. I loved my son. I was afraid that setting a limit meant withdrawing love, and I'd spent so many years making sure he knew he was loved that I couldn't see where the love ended and the self-erasure began. That kind of confusion doesn't make you weak, but it does make you someone who ends up sleeping on the edge of exhaustion while other people watch television in your living room. What changed me wasn't one dramatic moment. It was Pauline at the diner, putting down her fork and looking at me straight. It was the sound of my own voice explaining the vacuum schedule and hearing, maybe for the first time, how absurd it was. There's something that happens when you say a thing out loud to someone who won't let you minimize it. Something in you stops being able to pretend. I think that's what real honesty requires, not just knowing the truth, but being willing to stop protecting yourself from it. I had to find that willingness. That took something from me, some kind of courage I didn't know I had left at 66. It would have been easier to keep going, keep adding shifts, keep telling Pauline it was fine, easier in the short term. But I've learned that the things we avoid because they're hard almost always cost us more in the end than the hard thing itself would have. And I had to be smart about it, calling Walter Greer, understanding my rights, going through the legal process rather than just having an explosion at the kitchen table. That mattered. Emotions alone don't change situations. You have to understand what you're dealing with and move carefully and with your eyes open. I'm glad I did it that way. It kept things as intact as possible, for Kaylee's sake most of all. I don't know what Travis will do with what happened. That's not mine to carry. What I know is that I finally did what I should have done much earlier. I told the truth, I held to it, and I let the consequences come. The porch in the morning. The bird feeder. The herb bed waiting for spring. I earned that quiet. I just wish I'd believed sooner that I deserved it.